You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This episode is titled, The World is Your Mirror. And in this episode, I talk about how many of us want to create so much more in life. And you've heard me say before that we're working backwards, and then we go out in the world looking for ways to create what it is that we want, not even recognizing that we have to first change inside ourselves to create external change in our life. And then we wonder what we have to change inside of ourselves and what's really going on inside of us, when in reality, what's inside of us is mirrored on the outside of us. So that's the topic this week. And the reality is that it pertains to everyone. Me, you, everyone. Keep listening. Okay, this episode, I did my best to make it as cogent as I possibly could. Maybe a train wreck, I don't know. And what I mean by that is, I know that you listen to these episodes and they're 30 minutes long, thereabouts. Many times it takes me hours, 2, 3, 4 hours, to think through and to process what it is that I want to say in that 30 minutes. Sometimes it takes days, literally, for me to actually come to, because many times I wait for inspiration. I pull these episodes from my own life. Many times I'm looking for things that are going on in my own life, lessons that I'm learning, and I'm like, okay, I can share that, and let me share it in a way that will make sense on the podcast. And it may take me days to craft it. So and I know they do, and it's fine because it's the way that it seems. If the episode's only 30 minutes, that 30 minutes might be born of 2, 3, 4 days of mental pondering and contemplation and thought, and even some analysis about how to make it cogent for people to be able to assimilate it very easily. So this episode could be a train wreck because I've had a couple of thoughts come to me, and I've tried to mix mash them together. So we'll see what happens. Definition of a mirror is a reflective surface. Every one of you, me, all of us, we have a reflective surface in our life, and that is our external life. And it's reflective of our internal life. Hence the name of the podcast, Transform Your Life from the Inside Out. And we think we get it, but many times we just don't have that aha, is that, oh my God, wow. Everything I have in my external world is a reflection of my internal world. And that's so simple. It's right in front of our eyes that we miss it. Now, I'm not going to go really into it here, but one of the best friends I've ever had in my life is a legendary businesswoman. She founded $1 billion company, multiple billions. And she said to me one day about, 10, 12 years ago, she said, Jim, people just don't get it, is that to be successful in the world, you have to be successful in your mind. Now, prior to her saying that, I'd heard it a lot of times in my life. I mean, come on, I've been in this field 25 years and been interested in it 35 years. And I've heard this a lot of times. But for some reason, when we were in her car and watching her demonstrate building a multi-billion-dollar company, and her being a personal friend of mine, and watching her be extraordinarily, I can't talk today, extraordinarily, there we go, successful, I'm like, I get it. I'm watching her be successful in her mind, and because she's successful in her mind, wow, look at what she's created in the world. I want to segue here for a second. So many times also, we look for external things to have better lives. So many times people will say things like, I want to find myself, and I want to go to Europe to find myself. Husband and wife, friends of mine, she a couple of years ago said that she was lost in life and she didn't know her purpose and she wanted to find herself. And she wanted to go to Europe by herself. And she did. She went to Europe for a month by herself. And she came back and she was just as lost. And what I giggled about is that she went thousands of miles away on a very expensive trip to find herself which she didn't, air quote, she didn't do it. And the reality is that she never had to leave home to find herself. She never had to leave right inside her own mind to find herself. And there's a couple of ways we can look at this. One way here is the nature of the podcast, transform your life from the inside out. And then another way, and this is where I hope I don't mishmash things too much, is to go deeply and profoundly inside ourselves spiritually. And if you want to find yourself really, if you really want to find yourself, it's easy. What makes your heart sing? What do you love to do? Because that is a reflection of you. That is a mirror of you. And then what we often do is we negate that because we get into our analytical mind. No, let me give you 74 reasons why I can't do that. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too tall. I'm too short. I'm too fat. I'm too skinny. I'm too this. I'm too that. I have kids. I don't have kids. I have money. I don't. For crying out loud. It's all excuses. Ernest Holmes, he lived about 100 years ago. And in his book, The Science of Mind, I believe that's the name of it. I forget. But he has a quote in there. And the quote is extraordinarily, I could say it, extraordinarily profound quote that we miss. And it's this: life is a mirror, and it will reflect back to the thinker what he thinks into it. Life is a mirror, and it will reflect back to the thinker what he thinks into it. Your life is a mirror, and what it reflects back to you is what you think into it. Your life is a mirror, and what it reflects back to you is what you think into it. That should, I'm using this should word, that word should hit you right between the eyes like a 2x4. And the reason you're here, no other reason, is you want more in life. But many of you, why else would you be here? I know that I personally don't think I'm all that interesting to listen to. I know at my age, I'm not all that much to look at anymore. And I'm just kidding. And I'm just, for those of you that take things too seriously, I'm just being jovial. But the reality is you're here because you want something. But many times we're wanting something outside of ourselves. We're wanting something external. We're wanting to take a trip. We're wanting to go find this or that or do this or do that, or wanting something, wanting money or wanting love. That's a great one. Let me go there for a second. So many people want love, and they will go outside of themselves to look for love. They will go looking for love in people. They will go looking for love in things. And in reality is you can only find love to the degree that you love yourself. You don't like yourself, you don't love yourself, guess what? You're going to attract that at an identity level right back into your life again. This is why you see people that are wonderful and they're nice and they're kind generally attract people like that. Not all the time, but generally. And you see bitter people attract bitter people. And this is simple math. Is that a wonderful thinking person that's very positive doesn't want to be around a bitter person for the most part, most times. Unless they have to, and it's Thanksgiving and we're stuck for a few hours. But let's go back here. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to go anywhere to find yourself, because yourself is inside of you. And what we really have to do more than anything is, if you want to know yourself, at least how you show up in the world subconsciously, simple dimple, easy. Just observe. Observe yourself. Observe your horrible job. Observe your broken relationships. Observe your circumstances, all of them, not part of them, because we tend to compartmentalize things. Observe your life. Your life is a mirror of you internally, at least subconsciously. It's not a mirror of your divine nature entirely, and that's what I'm going to, touch on a little bit. But your life, everything you've created, the home and the house and the cars and the kids and everything, the job, is a reflection of your subconscious identity. And then what we do without even recognizing it, we take that identity out in the world and we live it. And then what we do is what we create is we create an external world, a reflection of the internal world. Your takeaway, I'm not there yet, I mean the transformational takeaway, but your takeaway from that is all of your circumstances in your life, they're not circumstances. All of your circumstances in life are not circumstances. They are you reflected into your circumstances. And the irony and really interesting thing here is that we create our own circumstances. Every one of us, me, all of us, we create our circumstances. And then many of us, we fight our circumstances. And we fight and we look for things external to basically extinguish the fire. 911, I got this fire I don't like. I'm going to, go get the fire hydrant or, the extinguisher. I'm going to put it out. But the circumstances are a reflection of us. And we have to look inside and work inside. I want to go here again, and I'm going here a lot the last 6 months, is self-love. I sigh there because this applies to me, but it applies to all of us, is you're only going to attract in life to the degree to which you love yourself. And the reality is how much you love yourself and value yourself will be reflected in your relationships and your body and your money and everything in your life. And many times we'll fool ourselves also because we're great at fooling ourselves. We'll think that because that's a convenient answer and we're supposed to say it and we're going to look good if we say it, yes, I love myself. When I ask people, do they love themselves? If that were the case, then why are so many people hating on themselves and abusing themselves and doing all these things that we do to tear ourselves down? Because you've heard me say before, we do not destroy what we love. And if you're destroying your body, then you have to think about how much you love yourself, which is internal. The body is external. I was on a trip many years ago with my brother-in-law, Don Javier, and my family. And my sister came to my room, and we sat down. We were just chatting for a while, and she said, Jimmy, do you love yourself? And I think that I just inadvertently and knee-jerk answered, like I was just alluding to. I said, yes, I love myself. And on that very same trip, and interesting, she asked me that on the trip, on that very same trip, which, by the way, was in a small little town called Oracle, Arizona, which is outside of Tempe. I learned in Dreamtime, which I've talked about in the podcast. Dreamtime is your greatest superpower. And in the dream, I was looking at my brother-in-law, Don Javier, the shaman, the sorcerer. And in the dream, I was looking at him, and I was screaming. And I'm not a screamer. No one can ever say they've seen me scream in my life. That's not my nature. I was screaming top of my lungs at him. I mean, like angry scream. And I was pointing, and I was saying, I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. Now, I love him. And here's what happened next. It's kind of like from the TV show back in the 60s, I Dream of Jeannie, with the smoke coming out of the bottle. What happened is the room got smoky right in front of me. And the room, actually, the smoke cleared. And I'm standing there looking, not at Don Javier, but I'm looking in the mirror, like a desktop mirror, at myself. So what's that message? And what was I to take from that? Because just a night before, I'm like, yes, I love myself. I love myself. I was telling my sister, and in reality, for me, loving was not loving myself, which is okay, let me go here. If you really want to love yourself, that comes down to self-acceptance. Because if you don't accept yourself, you don't love yourself. Now, I told you I'm probably going to mangle this episode, and I'm trying to put some thoughts here together. And by the way, so let me go here first. So the reflection of that in my life, of that lack of self-acceptance, was I have a good life. and I've always had a good life, all of my life. This lifetime has been an amazing life in pretty much every possible way. Even for all the air quote bad things that have happened to me, they're all lessons because I learned from everything. I had heart failure 18 months ago. I had a stroke, I don't know what, 10 months ago. I'm perfectly fine today. I know how to heal myself. They're all lessons. But how I went through life was this numbness. I was just numb, a comfortable numbness. Like there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And notice when I was saying that, I was thinking there's got to be more, going out in the world looking for more, when in reality, that numbness was coming from inside of me. So when I was looking to the external world and mirroring that everything's okay, but I'm numb on the inside, I wasn't even recognizing that life was kind of like ho humdrum on the outside because that was a mirror of the numbness on my inside. So let that sink in for you. Is that your life mirrors you. And this is airtight. Because I'll always have some people saying, no, it doesn't. I'm different. Whatever. Reminds me of that Aggie joke, Texas Aggies. I grew up in Texas, and I was going to go to Texas A&M. I had a full scholarship. I didn't go. My dad's boss told me if I'd go to Texas, and we were poor, but my dad's boss is like, if you go to A&M, I'll give you a full ride. He was a big Aggie. So I used to, read a lot of Aggie jokes when I was a kid. But there's this one joke of this pastor, this preacher, and we'll come back to the episode in a minute. But he's in his congregation and he's preaching. And he says, every day, he said everyone. Here we go. He goes, everyone in this congregation someday is going to stop breathing and die. Yeah, that's it. One day, everyone in this I can't talk today. I'll start over again. And I'm not editing this. I don't edit my podcast for the most part. But he said, one day, everyone in this congregation will stop breathing and die. I got it out, by the way. There we go. And there was a guy laughing in the back row. And he said, son, what are you laughing at? And he said, I am not from this congregation. So anyway, I just sidetracked there for a second. But we're all from the congregation. And we're all going to leave the planet. And what I'm sharing with you now, just like that Aggie who actually left the planet probably 30 years ago, it applies to you. And your life mirrors you. And if you want more on the outside, you have to be more on the inside. And the most powerful place we can start with that is loving ourselves. I want to share a parable here. I've shared it before in the podcast. But this one monk comes to another and he goes, I've got something very valuable. I've got something really valuable that I want to hide, and I want no one to find it. Where do I hide it so no one can find it? And the wise monk said, that's easy. Hide it in himself or herself or themselves, being correct this day and age, but hide it in himself or herself. I like that better, because no one will find it and no one will look there. And we have to think about how much we don't look at, which comes from the inside, that we don't want to see. But we're always trying to change the outside world when the outside world was created by the inside. Let me concretize this. I have to go to dinner here in a bit. This is why I've got to get this episode done. And I'm trying here. I spent 3 hours on this today thinking about how do I tie all this together. And finally, I'm like, I've got dinner reservations. I've got to get this done. My team wants it. And I'm going to dinner in just a bit with one of my really good friends. Huge social media presence. I don't know. His YouTube videos, when he was big on YouTube, millions upon millions upon millions of views. One of the most amazing people that I know. His heart is the size of, it's the size of California or Texas. He's a really, really, really good guy. Yet, there was a little distance in our relationship that I created because he wasn't the braggart. He does not brag. But he's always trying to impress people. And he would try to impress people by over helping people and doing things for everything and saying things that he perhaps thought would make him appear in a different light to people. And we had a talk one day, and I said, you know what? You're good enough as you are, because you're an extraordinary human being. You do amazing things in the world. You built an amazing company. You have a heart that's just unmatchable, yet you're still looking for the outside approval of other people because which on the inside, you're extraordinary. So what I'm sharing with you there is that when we look inside, many times we'll find two places to go here. Is your external world is a reflection of your internal subconscious mind, because we're mirrors. The world mirrors us. But what we also have to do, which would be episode 6, is of the podcast, is look inside ourselves. Because until we look inside ourselves, we're always trying to change the outside mirror. And we're unfulfilled like I was. I was numb. We're unfulfilled for so many years in our life. And then we try to fill that unfulfilled part of ourselves with homes and cars and a beautiful body and boyfriends and girlfriends, and maybe both for some of you, boyfriends and girlfriends. I don't know, whatever your thing is. But we're trying to fill it with something outside of ourselves. And we're always searching, always searching, always searching, always searching. When we're going to go two places here, is find it in the divinity and the amazingness of yourself and come to realize that, or recognize something's got to change with your subconscious mind. And that being said, I just finished the Be Do Have series, and it's not open again for 6 more months, where that's all I talk about. Going to get on my soapbox for 30 seconds. This podcast has millions of downloads. And we did very well. I mean, a lot of people, thousands of people showed up. 30,000 people registered for the series. 10,000 showed up, which is normal. But you know what? So many people want something more in the external world, but they don't fully recognize that they're chasing something on the outside when they really should be going on the inside. And what they're chasing on the outside is money and things that actually own them and don't matter, instead of working on things on the inside. You know, let me go here for a second also, I'm just jumping around kind of like scotch taping some pieces together, because like I said, this episode was a train wreck, and I'm like, Jim, you just got to put it out. And many years ago, I remember one of my coaches said, is that a lot of times in life when people stay busy all the time, they're always busy, they're looking for something. And she also said is that they stay busy to distract themselves from themselves. Think about that. And you look at people that are busy all the time, and especially workaholics, busy all the time. And when I say this in live groups, people get it a lot of times. But people are doing things to distract themselves from themselves, because many people find it uncomfortable to look inside themselves and get comfortable and sit with themselves. And the reality is, if you take the word intimacy and you take it apart, look at that word. It could also be pronounced as or spoken as, in to me I see, which is intimacy. I want to share a story with you here. Many years ago, I had to do a speech, and it was for a class that I was taking. It was an NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming class, and I had to do a speech. And I forgot the topic and everything else, but we were in the mountains of Georgia. There's no mountains, but the hills of Georgia. And I looked down one day. I was out by myself in nature, and I looked down, and I saw something shiny. And I picked it up, and I wiped it off, and it was a crystal, a beautiful crystal, a little bit of, maybe an inch in diameter and size. And I thought, I'm like, there's what I want to talk about right now. And that's what I want to talk about in the speech, is that we're all like crystals on the inside. But what happens is we get muddy and dirty because of the external world on the outside. And you're like a crystal, a beautiful, clean crystal, and connecting with divine mind, because it's a whole different frequency and energy when you're loving yourself. and accepting yourself. Okay, so transformational takeaway. I have no idea what it is for this episode. Like I said, I finally had to take the train wreck and just put it on the train, the train wreck, and put it on the train tracks and see what happens, because people will pull from this what they want to pull. And some people could pull as like, Jim, get your shit together. You didn't even have your episode. I don't know. People are going to pull different things. But the reality is, and something, food for thought, is the world is your mirror, and it will mirror back what you reflect into it. Thanks for listening, and do what you can to make it a great day today. Bye-bye.